We all chase happiness, right? That feeling of, like deep contentment and joy. But so often we fall into that trap of thinking, if I just had the dream job, the perfect partner, the winning lottery ticket, then I'd finally be happy.
It's so common.
Yeah. Today, we're going to challenge that idea by diving deep into the life and philosophy of someone who found happiness not in spite of, but because immense suffering, Nelson Mandela.
It's a paradox, isn't it? I mean, we all have this idea that happiness is tied to good fortune.
Yeah.
Yet here's a man who endured 27 years in prison and came out not just unbroken, but like radiating joy.
Exactly. And what I think is so fascinating is we're not just basing this on Mandela's autobiography or
I like
something.
that today.
Our source material for this deep dive is actually a podcast episode.
Oh, wow.
It's titled Happiness According to Nelson Mandela, Resilience, Forgiveness, and Finding Freedom Within. So we're getting insights, directly from his words and beliefs.
That's powerful. And what strikes me is how his beliefs are just so deeply rooted in his own experience. He wasn't, like some philosopher in an ivory tower.
Yay.
He lived through unimaginable hardship and somehow came out the other side with this profound understanding of what truly matters.
All right, so let's set the scene a bit. I mean, I know, the basic outline of Mandela's life, but for our listeners, can you paint a picture of what he went through?
Imagine being born in 1918 in South Africa.
Yeah.
A nation completely ruled by apartheid. So, from the moment Mandela entered the world, his opportunities were limited simply because of his race. It would be enough to make anyone cynical, But Mandela, he chose a different path.
Yeah. He wasn't just going to sit back and accept that injustice, was he?
Not at all.
He joined the ANC, a political organization dedicated to, ending apartheid, and became this key figure in their fight for equality.
Right.
But, I mean, that bravery had a cost, didn't it?
It did. In 1964, Mandela and several other ANC leaders were sentenced to life imprisonment. Yeah. For the next 27 years, he endured brutal conditions, total isolation, and the constant threat of violence.
It's just, I can't even imagine.
It's a period that would break most people, yeah.
Right.
Mandela emerged with his spirit intact.
It's mind-blowing to not just survive that, but then come out and lead South Africa to a peaceful transition, becoming its first black president in 1994. It's almost superhuman.
And this is where it gets truly remarkable, I think. Mandela didn't just achieve, political freedom. He embodied this deep internal freedom that allowed him to not only forgive his oppressors,
Wow.
but to find genuine happiness.
Okay, see, that's what I want to unpack here. This is a man who has every reason to be bitter, to be angry, to be vengeful, yet he somehow becomes a symbol of forgiveness and joy. There's got to be something deeper going on than just, positive thinking, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of Mandela's most powerful quotes speaks directly to this. He said, "As I walked out the door toward the gate that would lead to my freedom, I knew if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I'd still be in prison."
Wow. That's potent imagery.
It is.
He's basically saying that true freedom and therefore true happiness, it begins in the mind.
Exactly. For Mandela, holding on to anger, resentment, wouldn't punish his former captors. It would only keep him captive. So how did he achieve this mental and emotional liberation? Well, forgiveness was key.
Okay. But this is where I always get stuck. I mean, how do you forgive people who have inflicted that much pain? Is that even possible,
Right.
let alone, healthy?
That's a question so many people grapple with. And it's important to note that Mandela's concept of forgiveness wasn't about condoning the actions of the apartheid regime.
Of course.
He was very clear. Their actions were wrong. Justice needed to be served. But for him, forgiveness was a personal act of liberation.
So it's more about releasing yourself from the burden of carrying that anger and hatred.
Precisely. Mandela saw forgiveness as essential, not just for the well-being of others, but for your own inner peace. It's like that saying, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It only eats away at you.
I like that. So, and this is where I think we get to the heart of what made Mandela's approach to happiness so unique. It wasn't about external circumstances or seeking pleasure. It was about this internal state of being cultivated through choices like forgiveness.
You're absolutely right. And forgiveness wasn't the only tool in his sort of happiness toolkit.
Right.
He also believed deeply in finding a purpose larger than yourself.
This is interesting because it seems like so much of, modern society is just obsessed with happiness through self-improvement, like getting ahead, accumulating more stuff. Mandela seems to be saying that's looking in the wrong place.
He is. Mandela found profound fulfillment in dedicating his life to fighting for justice and equality. He believed that serving something bigger than your own desires, contributing to the greater good, was a key ingredient for genuine happiness.
Okay, I'm seeing a pattern here. Forgiveness as an act of inner liberation. Purpose is something that transcends kind of your own ego. Both of these point to this way of being that's not about what you get, but how you live.
And this connects beautifully to another one of Mandela's core beliefs, resilience. I mean, his life was, of course, defined by overcoming, unimaginable obstacles.
Yeah.
But he didn't just endure hardship, passively.
Right.
He saw it as an opportunity for growth.
That's such a radical idea in a world where we're constantly just trying to avoid discomfort
Right.
and optimize for ease. What did he actually mean by embracing hardship?
Well, Mandela believed that challenges, while painful, were inevitable in life. But how we chose to respond to them, that's where our power lies. He didn't seek out suffering, but when it came, he met it head on, using it as fuel to become stronger.
So instead of being defeated by hardship, he actually found a way to draw strength, and even like joy from it. That's incredible. But it also raises a big question. How do we actually cultivate that kind of resilience in our own lives, especially now when, there's so much uncertainty in the world and things feel so precarious?
That's where Mandela gets incredibly practical. He wasn't just about lofty ideals. He laid out specific mindsets and actions that we can all take to cultivate happiness, even amidst difficulty.
All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty. What are some of those actionable insights? I'm ready to take notes.
It's amazing, how these experiences that most people would see as purely negative gave rise to such powerful insights on living a fulfilling life.
Yeah. I'm eager to dive into the specifics of what he actually did to cultivate happiness. It's easy to talk about forgiveness and resilience in the abstract, but I want to know what those concepts actually look like in his everyday life.
Right. Let's start with forgiveness. Remember, this wasn't about, erasing the wrongs of apartheid or pretending they didn't happen. Mandela was very much an advocate for justice. But he realized that holding on to that bitterness and anger, it would only keep him trapped in the past,
Yeah.
poisoning his own spirit.
So what did practicing forgiveness actually, entail for him? Did he just wake up one day and decide to let go of all that pain and resentment?
Well, it was a very conscious, very deliberate practice. One technique he used was journaling. He would actually write letters to his oppressors, expressing his anger, his pain, but also acknowledging, their humanity. He wouldn't send these letters, of course,
Right.
but the act of writing helped him to process those emotions and move towards a place of understanding.
That's fascinating. It's like he was actively engaging with that anger, not trying to, suppress it, but channeling it in a way that ultimately led to healing.
Exactly. It wasn't about denying the validity of his feelings, but about transforming them into something that could fuel his journey toward inner peace and freedom. And this ties in, beautifully to his emphasis on purpose.
Okay. So how did finding a purpose, larger than himself contribute to Mandela's happiness? I mean, we've touched on his commitment to fighting for justice and equality, but was there more to it than that?
There was. Even during his imprisonment, Mandela actively sought ways to make a positive impact. He became a mentor to fellow prisoners, sharing his knowledge, inspiring them to never give up hope. He organized educational programs within the prison, creating this sense of community and purpose, even in those harsh conditions.
That's incredible. He didn't let the, confines of his prison cell limit his ability to contribute to something bigger than himself.
Right.
It's like this powerful reminder that purpose isn't always about, these grand gestures, right? It can be about finding ways to make a difference in your immediate surroundings, no matter where you are.
Precisely. And for Mandela, the sense of purpose was, very deeply intertwined with resilience. He didn't see these challenges as something to be, avoided or overcome as quickly as possible. He viewed them as opportunities for growth, for learning, a chance to test and strengthen his spirit.
So how did he actually, embrace hardship? I'm struggling to imagine how anyone could see 27 years of imprisonment as anything other than, pure suffering.
Well, Mandela had this incredible ability to find meaning, even in the darkest of moments. He used his time in prison to study law, to learn Afrikaans, the language of his oppressors, and even to secretly write his autobiography. He refused to let his circumstances define him. He actively chose how he would respond to them.
That's a truly powerful mindset shift. He wasn't just passively enduring hardship. He was, actively shaping it,
Yeah.
using it to fuel his own growth and development. I'm starting to see how all these pieces, forgiveness, purpose, resilience, they fit together to create this foundation for, like, this lasting happiness that's not dependent on, external circumstances. You're spot on.
Mhm.
And this brings us to another, key element of Mandela's approach, humility. Despite all his achievements and, global recognition, he remained grounded, focused on serving others. Never let fame or power inflate his ego.
Humility can be a tough one, especially in today's world where we're constantly bombarded with messages telling us to, promote ourselves, build our personal brand, strive for recognition. How did Mandela stay so grounded amidst all that attention and those accolades?
One practice he was known for was actively seeking feedback from others, even those who disagreed with him. He understood that he didn't have all the answers, that true growth comes from, being open to different perspectives. He also made a conscious effort to lift up and celebrate the achievements of those around him, never making it about himself.
That's such a stark contrast to the like me first mentality we often see today, isn't it? It's refreshing to remember that true leadership isn't about, ego or self-aggrandizement. It's about empowering others and working together towards a common goal. And I imagine that kind of humility fosters this deeper sense of connection, which ties into Mandela's emphasis on empathy.
Absolutely. Mandela understood that true peace and progress could only be achieved through understanding and connection, even with those who held opposing views. He often spoke about the importance of walking in someone else's shoes, of seeking to understand their perspective, even if you don't agree with them.
That's a powerful challenge, especially in today's world, which feels so incredibly polarized.
Yeah.
It's so easy to just demonize those who hold different views, to dismiss them as like the other.
Right.
How did Mandela manage to cultivate empathy for those who had caused him and his people so much pain?
He recognized that everyone, even those who commit terrible acts, are shaped by their own experiences and beliefs, right? He believed that seeking to understand those experiences without condoning the actions was essential for building bridges and fostering reconciliation.
So it's about seeing the humanity in everyone, even those who have, done wrong. Not about excusing their actions, but about understanding the complexities that led them to that point. It's a challenging concept, but one that feels incredibly relevant in today's world.
It is challenging,
Yeah.
but it's also incredibly liberating. When we choose to see the humanity in others, we open ourselves up to the possibility of connection and understanding, even across, seemingly insurmountable divides. And that, I believe, is the essence of Mandela's legacy.
This has been an incredibly rich and nuanced exploration of Mandela's approach to happiness. We've gone beyond the,
Hmm.
surface level platitudes and really dug into the practical strategies and mindsets that allowed him to find joy and fulfillment, even in the face of, immense suffering.
It's remarkable, isn't it, how his teachings, rooted in such a specific and challenging context, can be applied to, our lives today. His message of forgiveness, purpose, resilience, humility, and empathy, it transcends time and circumstance, offering this powerful roadmap for navigating the complexities of modern life.
Absolutely. We've covered a lot of ground, but I feel like we've only scratched the surface of, what we can learn from Mandela's legacy. So before we wrap up, I want to shift gears a bit and talk about the broader implications of his teachings for the world today. What can we, as individuals and as a society, learn from his extraordinary example? Mandela's journey is so inspiring, but it also makes you wonder, how can we, everyday people who haven't faced that level of hardship, actually apply these principles? Like, is it even possible to reach that level of inner peace and happiness without going through what he did?
That's the beauty of his teachings. They're not exclusive to, a particular experience. Remember, he wasn't born with this wisdom. He cultivated it over a lifetime through choices and practices. Yeah.
Right. So, yes, it's totally possible to integrate these principles regardless of our circumstances.
Okay, so let's get specific then. We've laid out the foundation of his approach:
Yeah.
forgiveness, purpose, resilience, humility, and empathy.
Mhm.
But what are some tangible steps our listeners can take to actually start living these values?
Well, we have to remember these aren't like separate items on a checklist, right?
Yeah.
They're all interconnected. Take forgiveness, for instance. Mandela often talked about how it wasn't just about the other person, it was about freeing yourself.
Yeah.
And that freedom can then, fuel a sense of purpose because you're not carrying around that weight of anger.
It's not about denying the injustice, but like refusing to let it define you.
Hmm.
That makes sense, but how do you actually do that?
Yeah.
It's easy to say forgive, but the emotions are real.
Yeah, and that's where practice comes in. Mandela, he used journaling, but there are so many methods. Mindfulness meditation, for example, can help you, just observe those feelings without judgment.
Even something as simple as shifting your focus to gratitude. Instead of dwelling on what's been done to you, think about the good things in your life, however small.
That's a great point. It's easy to get caught in that, negativity spiral, but
Yeah.
actively choosing to focus on the positive, it can shift your whole perspective. And I imagine that kind of mental shift makes it easier to then, tap into a sense of purpose.
Exactly. When you're not consumed by anger and resentment, you just have more energy, to dedicate to what matters to you. And purpose doesn't have to be this grand, world-changing thing.
Right.
It can start small, volunteering in your community, mentoring someone, even just being a more present and supportive friend or family member.
I think so many people get stuck on finding their big purpose, and it can be paralyzing.
Right.
But if focusing on what you can do, right now to make a positive impact, that feels more manageable.
It is. And those small actions, they build on each other. The more you live in alignment with your values, the more that purpose naturally emerges. This is where resilience comes in as well, because inevitably you're going to encounter setbacks, disappointments, even, outright failures along the way.
Yeah, and that's where I think Mandela's example is so powerful. He didn't just, talk about resilience. He embodied it,
Yeah.
in the face of unimaginable hardship. But for someone who's struggling, how do you even begin to cultivate that kind of strength?
Well, it starts with, I think, changing your relationship to discomfort. We're, so conditioned to avoid pain. But Mandela understood that challenges are just inevitable, and that's actually where growth happens. He used to say, I never lose. I either win or I learn. That reframing is crucial.
So instead of seeing setbacks as personal failures, view them as learning opportunities. That's a powerful mindset shift.
It is. And don't underestimate the power of, self-compassion. Mandela was incredibly disciplined, but he also knew when to rest, to reflect, to allow himself to feel his emotions. Resilience isn't about pushing through at all costs. It's about knowing your limits and, taking care of yourself.
That's such an important point. So often we, equate resilience with just gritting our teeth and powering through, but true strength also involves knowing when to, step back and recharge.
Exactly. And that's where humility comes in, I think. It's about recognizing that you don't have to do everything alone, that asking for help is a sign of strength, not weakness. It's also about being open to feedback, even if it's critical, because that's how you learn and grow.
I love that. It's a reminder that we're all works in progress, constantly learning and evolving. And that ties into the, final element of Mandela's approach, empathy.
Yes, and this is perhaps the most challenging yet the most rewarding aspect of his legacy. In today's world, where it's so easy to get caught in these echo chambers and filter bubbles, actively seeking out diverse perspectives, it can feel uncomfortable,
Right.
even threatening.
It's definitely easier to stay in our own little corners of the world surrounded by people who, already agree with us.
Right.
But Mandela, he challenges us to do the opposite, to engage with those who hold different beliefs, to seek to understand their experiences, even if we don't, condone their actions.
It's about recognizing, that shared humanity in all of us, despite our differences. And it's not about pretending that those differences don't matter or that everyone has to agree. It's about fostering a space for, respectful dialogue where we can learn from each other and build bridges of understanding.
This deep dive has been incredibly insightful. We've explored the complexities of Mandela's life and legacy, and I think what stands out the most is the actionable nature of his teachings. These aren't just, lofty ideals, they're practices we can all weave into our daily lives.
He showed us that even amidst, unimaginable hardship, it's possible to cultivate joy, purpose, and connection. His life is a testament to the transformative power of forgiveness, the importance of finding a purpose larger than ourselves, the strength that comes from resilience, the beauty of humility, and the unifying force of empathy.
So to our listeners, if someone who endured 27 years of imprisonment could emerge with such a profound sense of peace and happiness, what does that tell us about our own potential? What choices can you make, starting today, to live a life that's more aligned with these values?
And remember, Mandela's journey wasn't a straight line. It was filled with setbacks, doubts, and moments of despair. But he never gave up on his vision of a more just and compassionate world. and neither should we.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the heart and mind of Nelson Mandela. May his legacy inspire you too to embrace your own potential for happiness, resilience, and positive change.